Gather round for the old-time bed turning. My name is Chris Moline. I'm an AQS certified appraiser of quilted textiles and an associate of Jean S. Lyle. Our booth is right behind. American Quilters Society asked Jean and I to provide a selection from our private collection of antique quilts. Our first quilt this morning is Windblown Tulips. It's 82 by 103. It was made by Virginia Kern in 1933. It's all cotton, hand appliqued, machine pieced, and hand quilted. This is a classic Marie Webster design. This particular quilt won an honorable mention in the Sears Century of Progress contest in 1933. Mrs. Kern was also very well known in the Chicago area. She was the wife of a prominent obstetrician in the Roseland and Pullman district. She and her husband lived in Evanston. They were well known because every baby that was delivered by her husband received a little gold ring. This next quilt is an ocean wave. It's not the traditional ocean wave that we think of, but the pattern is known as ocean wave. It's 68 by 84. It was made by Eleanor Sampson, a Mennonite woman who lived in southern Illinois in the 1870s. It's all cotton, hand-pieced and quilted. Mrs. Sampson made many quilts for victims of the Civil War for the Sanitary Commission, and her quilts were distributed on both sides of the war. This one is from her personal collection and was never distributed. No bed turning would be complete without an old-fashioned grandmother's flower garden. This one is 72 by 84. Unfortunately, the maker is unknown, but it's from the 1930s. It's all cotton, hand-pieced and quilted. These are 1-inch hexagons. It's also interesting to note she fussy cut her little hexagons to get swirls of pattern and color and flowers. The next quilt is an Amish single Irish chain. It's 76 by 83, and it's from the family of Samuel Kannagi of Mifflin County, Pennsylvania. This quilt was made in the 1920s. It's all cotton, machine pieced, and hand quilted. The simplicity of design is very traditional for the Amish of that area. However, the quilting is exquisite. This next quilt, the pattern name is called Star of the West. It's 66 by 78. The maker was from Ohio, and it was made in the 1890s. Again, it's all cotton, hand and machine pieced, and hand quilted. Indigo quilts, two-color quilts, are very typical of that time period in the 1890s, especially blue and white. I love the fact, though, that some of her white prints have red designs, which gives you just a hint of the red, white, and blue. The next quilt is a folk art 4-block. It's 82 inches square. It was made by Susan Smith of Massachusetts in the 1840s. It's all cotton, hand appliqued, assembled, and quilted. The 4-block style is very typical of the time period. Now, I just love the whimsy of her little splotches here, kind of like a Rorschach test, but amorphous blobs. But basically, these are just covering the intersections of the blocks. This next quilt is a lightning set red work. Now, the lightning set refers to this section that goes through here, separating the blocks to give you that streak of lightning effect. It's 60 by 68 inches. The maker is unknown, but we have her initials, KM, and the date, 1891, on the top. It's all cotton, machine assembled and quilted, hand embroidered, of course, with some of the very classic designs of red work. The most distinctive feature of this quilt, though, is the 3-inch handmade bobbin lace on the edge all around. The next quilt we call Triangles Galore. Technically, it's a central medallion. There's one red square in the center, so technically a central medallion. There's over 6,500 half-square triangles in one square. It's 94 by 100 inches. The initials MF and the date 1852 are in little tiny cross stitch on the back. This quilt is from England. It's all cotton. It is English paper pieced and hand quilted. English paper piecing was usually done in hexagons at the time, so these triangles are pretty unusual. The next quilt is a princess feather. It's 96 by 98, and while the maker's name is unknown, it came from Pennsylvania and was made in the 1850s. Again, all cotton, hand-pieced, appliqued, and quilted. The princess feather design is very typical of that time period. Some of the feathers are stylized, others are straight, like these. But I just love her little red bows. Very unique for this quilt. Next one. As they're turning it over, you can notice her very fine hand quilting. The quilting lines are an 1/8 inch apart. This next quilt is a kit quilt. How the Elephant Got His Trunk. It's 60 by 90 inches. Although the maker is unknown, the pattern came out in 1934. The kit came out in 1934, and the images relate to the Rudyard Kipling story, How the Elephant Got His Trunk. It's all cotton, machine pieced, hand appliqued, embroidered, and quilted. Now the maker of this particular quilt followed the instructions in the kit to the letter. In fact, the instructions don't tell you to take the paper out of the back of the applique, so the paper is still here. The instructions also don't tell you how to finish the corners, so we have 2 blue lines here that, she didn't know what to do with. The instructions didn't tell her. She left it alone. So when you see quilts from this kit, they all have just slightly different corners because sometimes people made it up and sometimes they did something just a little different. This next quilt we call baby baskets. Can you understand why? It was made in Missouri. It's all cotton, hand-pieced, appliqued, and quilted. Now, if you've been over on the far side over here to the National Quilt Museum exhibit of basket quilts, new from old, this quilt hung in the museum as part of the exhibit comparing old quilts and the newly designed in the pattern. These baskets are a traditional block, but these minis are just so cute. Our last quilt is a Star of Bethlehem. My favorite name for this quilt is Quilted to Death. It's 96 inches square. It was made by M.A. Anderson in 1855, and we know that because she corded her name and the date here in the quilting, in very fine quilting. Again, all cotton. It's hand-pieced, hand-quilted, hand-stuffed, hand-corded, all by hand. This quilt came from an estate in St. Paul, Minnesota. Of course, it was made in 1855. Minnesota wasn't a state yet. It was a territory, so this was made out in the wilds. Every quilt design all the blocks, all the triangles, have different quilting designs, all unique. Thank you for attending our bed turning. I'd like to thank Des Moines Area Quilt Guild for providing turners and the Des Moines Mattress Company for providing us with a bed.